Quebec is the largest province in Canada. Most people know that. Most people do not know that Quebec is larger than Alaska, larger than all 5 Scandinavian countries combined, or that it generates enough electricity to power its entire economy and still sell the surplus to New York and Boston. Most people do not know that Montreal was once the largest city in Canada and the financial capital of the country, or that the St. Lawrence River carries ocean-going ships 3,700 kilometers into the continental interior, or that Quebec came within 0.6% of voting to leave Canada entirely in 1995. These are 50 facts about Quebec. Not myths to debunk, but true facts, the kind that reframe how you understand one of the most consequential pieces of land in North America. We are starting with the geography, working through the history and the economy, and ending somewhere that will change how you think about the province's future. Hit subscribe before we start. We do this every week, and you will not want to miss what is coming next. Number 1. Quebec is larger than Alaska. Quebec covers 1,542,056 square kilometers. Alaska covers 1,518,800 square kilometers. Most people treat Alaska as synonymous with immensity, but Quebec is larger by about 23,000 square kilometers, roughly the size of New Hampshire. Quebec is the largest province in Canada and the second largest political subdivision in North America after Nunavut. Number 2. Quebec has more fresh water than any other province. The province contains roughly 500,000 lakes and 4,500 rivers. The James Bay watershed alone drains nearly 1 million square kilometers of boreal forest. The total volume of fresh water on the surface of Quebec exceeds that of any comparably sized region on Earth that is not a polar ice cap. Number 3. The St. Lawrence Seaway allows ocean ships to travel 3,700 kilometers inland. Open ocean vessels, cargo ships carrying grain, steel, and manufactured goods, can sail from the Atlantic Ocean all the way to Duluth, Minnesota. They pass through the Gulf of St. Lawrence, upriver past Quebec City and Montreal, through the Great Lakes, and into the industrial heartland of North America. The Seaway, which was completed in 1959 jointly by Canada and the United States, fundamentally changed how the continent moves goods. Number 4. Quebec has more coastline than any other province. When you include the Gulf of St. Lawrence coastline, the shores of Hudson Bay, Hudson Strait, and Ungava Bay in northern Quebec, the total coastal length exceeds 13,000 kilometers. Quebec's northern coastline is so remote that significant stretches of it have never been surveyed at detailed scale. Number 5. Northern Quebec was under ice 1 kilometer thick as recently as 10,000 years ago. The Laurentide ice sheet covered virtually all of Quebec during the last ice age. When it retreated, it left behind the landscape that defines the province today. The exposed bedrock of the Canadian Shield, the thousands of lakes carved by glacial action, and the Hudson Bay and James Bay lowlands, which are still rebounding upward from the weight of that ice, a process called isostatic rebound that is still measurable today. Number 6. The Labrador Trough contains one of the richest iron ore deposits on Earth. The region of northern Quebec and Labrador, known as the Labrador Trough, holds iron ore reserves that have been mined since the 1950s. The mines at Fremont in northern Quebec and the associated infrastructure across the trough represent a continuous industrial operation in one of the most remote inhabited regions of the continent. Number 7. The Manicouagan Reservoir is one of the most visible man-made structures on Earth from space. The Manicouagan impact crater was formed roughly 214 million years ago, when an asteroid approximately 5 kilometers wide struck what is now central Quebec. It was flooded by a hydroelectric reservoir in the 1960s. The resulting ring-shaped lake, 70 kilometers in diameter, is one of the most distinctly recognizable features of the North American continent when viewed from orbit. Number 8. Quebec contains the Nunavik region, which is larger than Spain. Nunavik, the Inuit homeland in northern Quebec, covers more than 500,000 square kilometers and has a population of roughly 13,000 people. It is governed under the James Bay and Northern Quebec Agreement of 1975, one of the first modern Indigenous land rights agreements in Canada. Number 9. The St. Lawrence River is technically a tidal estuary for almost its entire navigable length. Saltwater from the Atlantic Ocean pushes far inland up the St. Lawrence. The tidal influence is measurable at Quebec City, hundreds of kilometers from the open ocean. Beluga whales live year-round in the St. Lawrence estuary, and they have been documented as far west as Trois-Rivières. Number 10. Quebec's southern border with the United States runs through the middle of a university building. Haskell Free Library and Opera House in Derby Line, Vermont and Stansted, Quebec was deliberately built straddling the international border in 1904. The reading room is in the United States, and the main entrance is in Canada. The stage of the Opera House is in Canada, while most of the audience sits in the United States. A line of tape on the floor marks where one country ends and the other begins. If you are enjoying this so far, hit that like button and drop a comment. Now let's get into the history. Number 11. Montreal was the largest city in Canada for over a century. From the mid-1800s until roughly 1970, Montreal was the largest and wealthiest city in Canada. It was the financial capital of the country, home to the head offices of the major banks, the railways, and the largest corporations. The shift of corporate headquarters to Toronto, which began in the 1960s and accelerated through the 1970s, partly in response to rising separatist sentiment, transformed the economic geography of the entire country. Number 12. The Battle of the Plains of Abraham lasted about 15 minutes. It was fought on September 13, 1759, and it decided the outcome of the 7 Years' War in North America, ultimately determining which empire would control the continent. French forces under Montcalm and British forces under Wolfe engaged outside Quebec City. Both commanders were fatally wounded. When the French broke and retreated, New France's fate was effectively sealed. Both generals died within days of the engagement. Number 13. New France was founded in 1608, before the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth Rock. Samuel de Champlain founded the settlement at Quebec City in 1608. The Pilgrims reached Plymouth in 1620. French colonization of the St. Lawrence Valley predates the founding of New England by more than a decade. The French presence in North America predates that. Cartier had sailed the St. Lawrence in 1534. Number 14. The Quiet Revolution transformed Quebec society in about a decade. Between roughly 1960 and 1970, Quebec went from one of the most religiously conservative societies in North America, with the Catholic Church controlling education, hospitals, and much of social life, to a secular, modernizing society with a state-run education system, public health care, and a pension plan. The transformation was called the Quiet Revolution because it was accomplished through legislation rather than violence, but its speed and thoroughness were not quiet at all. Number 15. The October Crisis of 1970 was the only time in Canadian history that the War Measures Act was invoked during peacetime. In October 1970, FLQ, the Front de Libération du Québec, kidnapped British diplomat James Cross and Quebec Cabinet Minister Pierre Laporte. Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau invoked the War Measures Act, suspending civil liberties across Canada and deploying the military in Quebec. Laporte was murdered. Cross was eventually released. Over 400 people were arrested, most of whom were released without charge. These events defined a generation of Quebec politics. Number 16. The 1995 Quebec referendum was decided by 50,000 votes. Of approximately 4.6 million votes cast, the No side, which favored remaining in Canada, won by 50.58% to 49.42%. The margin of victory was approximately 54,000 votes. Had the outcome been reversed, Canada, as currently constituted, would not exist. Number 17. The Chateau Frontenac in Quebec City is the most photographed hotel in the world. By some counts, Chateau Frontenac, the turreted railway hotel that dominates the skyline of Old Quebec City, is photographed more times per year than any other hotel on Earth. Its position above the cliffs of Cap Diamant and its unmistakable architecture have made it a global icon for a city that most people outside Canada underestimate. Number 18. Quebec City's fortification walls are the only remaining fortified city walls in North America, north of Mexico. The walls surrounding Old Quebec City, built and expanded by both French and British colonial forces between the 1690s and the 1870s, are the province's surviving city fortifications, and they are a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Number 19. French was an official language of Canada's Parliament before Confederation. The Act of Union of 1840 briefly prohibited French in Parliament after the failed rebellions of 1837 and 1838. It was restored before Confederation. The Official Languages Act of 1969 formalized French and English as equal official languages at the federal level, but French-speaking Canadians had been fighting for that recognition since the province of Quebec joined Canada in 1867. Number 20. The Laurentian Mountains are among the oldest mountain ranges on Earth. The Laurentians, which stretch across the Shield Country north of Montreal and Quebec City, were formed between 540 million and 1 billion years ago, more than twice the age of the Rocky Mountains. They have been so thoroughly eroded over geological time that they now appear as gentle hills rather than dramatic peaks, but the rock exposed in them is some of the oldest accessible bedrock in the world. Number 21. Quebec generates 94% of its electricity from hydropower. Unlike most jurisdictions in North America that rely heavily on natural gas, coal, or nuclear power, Quebec's electrical grid runs almost entirely on water. The James Bay Hydroelectric Project, one of the largest such projects in the world, alone generates more electricity than the entire country of New Zealand consumes. Number 22. Hydro-Quebec is the largest electricity exporter in North America. The provincial Crown Corporation sells electricity to New England, New York, and Ontario in quantities that have made it a structural component of those regions' grids. New England in particular relies on Quebec hydropower to meet demand during periods of peak consumption, and contracts for that electricity have been politically contentious on both sides of the border. Number 23. Quebec produces more than 70% of the world's maple syrup. The province is not just Canada's largest maple syrup producer. It dominates global production by a margin that has no real parallel in other agricultural commodities. The Federation of Quebec Maple Syrup Producers maintains a global strategic reserve of maple syrup, called the Maple Syrup Reserve. That reserve functions similarly to petroleum reserves in oil-producing countries, stabilizing prices in low production years. Number 24. The Global Strategic Maple Syrup Reserve is held in a warehouse in Quebec. The reserve holds tens of millions of kilograms of maple syrup in large barrels. In 2012, thieves stole approximately 3,000 tons of syrup from the reserve, roughly $18 million worth, in what was subsequently called the Great Canadian Maple Syrup Heist. The theft was discovered only during a routine inventory. Convictions followed years later. Number 25. Quebec has the lowest electricity prices of any province in Canada. Because of its hydroelectric capacity, and because Hydro-Quebec is a public utility whose profits return to the provincial government, residential electricity in Quebec costs roughly a third of what it costs in Ontario, and about a quarter of what it costs in Alberta. These low electricity prices are a significant structural advantage for energy-intensive industries, and they have attracted aluminum smelting, cryptocurrency mining operations, and data centers to the province. Number 26. Quebec is one of the world's leading producers of aluminum. Aluminum smelting requires enormous amounts of electricity, and Quebec's cheap, clean hydropower has made it one of the world's major aluminum-producing regions. The aluminum industry has been a pillar of the Quebec economy since the early 20th century, concentrated in the Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean region and along the St. Lawrence. Number 27. Montreal has the largest underground city in the world. The RASO, Montreal's underground pedestrian network, connects over 80 buildings, 60 residential complexes, 1,200 stores, 200 restaurants, and 40 bank branches through 33 kilometers of underground corridors. It was designed primarily to allow movement between buildings in winter without going outside. Tens of thousands of Montrealers go to work, shop, eat, and return home without ever stepping onto the street. Number 28. The Montreal Metro uses rubber-tired trains, not steel wheels on steel rails. When the Montreal Metro opened in 1966 for Expo 67, it became one of the first metro systems in the world to use pneumatic rubber tires on concrete guideways rather than traditional steel wheels on steel rails. The system is quieter, accelerates faster, and can handle steeper grades than conventional metros. The technology was borrowed from the Paris Metro, and the Montreal system was entirely designed by a French engineering team. Number 29. Bombardier, headquartered in Montreal, is one of the largest aircraft and train manufacturers in the world. The company that started in Quebec's eastern townships building snowmobiles in the 1940s became a global transportation manufacturer. The Bombardier Q400 turboprop, the C-Series jet now called Airbus A220, and the hundreds of commuter rail systems Bombardier has supplied around the world all trace their corporate origins to a Quebec workshop. Number 30. Quebec's film and television industry is the largest French-language entertainment market outside of France. Montreal and Quebec City support an entertainment ecosystem, studios, writers' rooms, distribution networks, and talent pipelines that produces film and television for a French-language global audience of over 300 million people. Quebec is not just a market for French-language content. It is a major producer of it. We're at the halfway point. Give this video a like if you're learning something, and let's keep going. Number 31. Quebec is the only jurisdiction in North America where French is the sole official language at the provincial level. Federal bilingualism applies across Canada, but within Quebec's own provincial government, courts, and public institutions, French is the only official language. English language services are available in many contexts, yet French remains the sole official language of the province. Number 32. The Office Québécois de la Langue Française, known by its initials OQLF, employs inspectors who investigate complaints about English on commercial signs. The OQLF, sometimes called the language police in English media, receives thousands of complaints annually and has authority to investigate businesses over language compliance. The inspectors have been the subject of international news coverage and considerable satire, but the agency is also a serious institutional expression of a genuine political commitment. Number 33. More people speak French as a first language in Quebec than in all other Canadian provinces combined, by a factor of 30. Quebec has approximately 6.4 million French first-language speakers. The total of French first-language speakers in all other Canadian provinces and territories is roughly 950,000. French outside Quebec is a meaningful cultural and political fact, but numerically, Quebec is where Canadian Francophonie lives. Number 34. Quebec. French preserves vocabulary, syntax, and pronunciation patterns from 17th century Norman and Parisian French that have since evolved differently in France. Speakers of European French and Quebec French can understand each other, but the accents, idioms, and informal vocabulary are different enough that radio announcers and television presenters in France sometimes subtitle Quebec French content. Number 35. The Quebec Charter of the French Language, known as Bill 101, passed in 1977. Bill 101 required French to be the language of the workplace, commercial signage, and the public administration. It required immigrants and their children to attend French language schools unless a parent had been educated in English in Canada. The bill transformed the linguistic character of Montreal within a generation, shifting the city from a functionally bilingual commercial environment to a primarily French language one. Number 36. The term Québécois is both an ethnic and a civic identity. In Quebec political discourse, Québécois has been used in two overlapping senses. One sense is as a term for ethnic French Canadians whose families have been in Quebec since the colonial period. The other sense is as a civic term encompassing anyone who lives in Quebec regardless of origin. The tension between those two definitions has been central to Quebec political debates about nationhood, immigration, and inclusion for decades. Number 37. Montreal has one of the largest Anglophone minority communities of any city whose dominant language is French. Approximately 13% of Montreal's population, around 260,000 people, identify English as their first language, and another large portion of the population is bilingual. The English-speaking community has its own institutions, hospitals, universities, and media organizations that have existed continuously for over 2 centuries. Number 38. McGill University in Montreal is regularly ranked among the top universities in the world. Founded in 1821, McGill operates entirely in English in the middle of a French-speaking city and province, and has consistently placed in global top 100 university rankings. It has produced 7 Nobel laureates, 2 Canadian prime ministers, and an extraordinary list of scientists and academics from around the world. Number 39. The name Quebec comes from an Algonquin word meaning where the river narrows. The word in the Algonquian languages, Quebec, described the narrowing of the St. Lawrence River at the point where Quebec City now stands. Champlain used the indigenous name for the place when he established his settlement in 1608, and it has remained the province's name through 5 centuries. Number 40. Over 1 million Quebecers emigrated to New England from 1840 to 1930. The period of mass emigration known as La Grande Hémorragie, the Great Hemorrhage, saw over 1 million French Canadians leave Quebec for the mill towns of Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and other New England states. Their descendants, known as Franco-Americans, still represent a significant portion of the population in cities like Lowell, Woonsocket, and Manchester. 10 facts left. The natural world of Quebec is one of the most underappreciated in Canada. Number 41. Quebec's boreal forest is one of the largest intact forest ecosystems remaining on Earth. The boreal forest of northern Quebec covers hundreds of thousands of square kilometers and represents one of the largest carbon sinks in North America. It is home to woodland caribou, wolverines, black bears, wolves, and species of migratory birds that breed in these forests and winter across South America. Number 42. The St. Lawrence Estuary has one of the most accessible beluga whale populations in the world. A resident population of approximately 900 beluga whales lives year-round in the St. Lawrence Estuary, and this is one of the few places in the world where saltwater beluga whales can be observed from the shoreline. The Saguenay and St. Lawrence Marine Park protects the core of their habitat. Number 43. The Saguenay Fjord is the southernmost fjord in the Eastern Hemisphere and one of the longest in North America. The Saguenay River's fjord section runs approximately 100 kilometers, with depths exceeding 270 meters in some places. The combination of cold salt water at depth and fresh river water at the surface creates nutrient upwelling that supports the exceptional marine biodiversity of the Saguenay and St. Lawrence confluence. Number 44. The Ungava Peninsula in northern Quebec is one of the least visited places in Canada. The Ungava Peninsula, the large landmass projecting into Hudson Strait in northern Quebec, has no roads, no towns beyond the indigenous communities of Nunavik, and receives almost no tourism. Its coastline faces some of the strongest tidal currents in North America. Ungava Bay tides can exceed 7 meters. It is one of the most extreme and least known environments in the country. Number 45. The Parc de la Gaspésie in the Gaspé Peninsula hosts caribou at the southernmost range of any woodland caribou population in North America. The Gaspésie woodland caribou are a distinct and isolated population, surrounded by human development on all sides. They survive in the high peaks of the Chic-Choc Mountains, the southernmost truly alpine terrain in eastern Canada. They are critically endangered. The population numbers fewer than 100 animals. Number 46. The James Bay lowlands of Quebec are among the most important shorebird staging areas in the Western Hemisphere. During migration, millions of shorebirds, including sandpipers, plovers, dowitchers, and other species, stop along the James Bay coasts to feed on tidal flats and wetlands before continuing south to their South American wintering grounds. The James Bay lowlands are as important to continental bird populations as they are unknown to most Canadians. Number 47. Quebec has more than 30 distinct regional climates. From the continental climate of the Laurentians, to the maritime-influenced climate of the Gaspé Peninsula, to the subarctic conditions of Nunavik, Quebec's geography creates more distinct climatic zones than most countries. Kuujjuaq in northern Quebec averages a January temperature of -24 degrees Celsius. Montreal's January average is -10 degrees Celsius. Both are in the same province. Number 48. The Jacques-Cartier River Valley in the Laurentians was scoured by glaciers to a depth of nearly 600 meters. The valley of the Jacques-Cartier River north of Quebec City represents some of the most dramatic glacially carved terrain in accessible eastern Canada. The walls of the valley rise nearly 600 meters above the river floor, creating a landscape that resembles a fjord, but sits deep in the continental interior. Number 49. The Hudson Bay coast of Quebec, known as the Bay James Coast, is technically accessible by the most remote road in Quebec. Route 109, which runs north to Radisson and the James Bay Project infrastructure, crosses hundreds of kilometers of boreal wilderness with no service stations and no communities between certain points. Driving the James Bay Road is considered one of the more serious road trips in eastern Canada, for precisely this reason. Number 50. Quebec's total area of protected land and water increased dramatically under a 2021 biodiversity commitment. Quebec has committed to protecting 30% of its territory by 2030 under the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. As of 2024, the province has protected approximately 23% of its territory. That is a total area larger than most countries in the world. The boreal forests, tundra, and coastal ecosystems being protected in Quebec represent one of the largest conservation commitments in North American history. 50 facts. 1 province. The largest in Canada, a place that produces most of the world's maple syrup, sits at the entrance to a continent via the St. Lawrence, came within 54,000 votes of leaving Canada, and holds water and power reserves that shape the energy and freshwater security of the entire northeastern portion of North America. If you want to keep looking at Canada this way, subscribe and turn on notifications. There is a lot more map left to look at.